the biggest key with interviews is to practice. So whether that be literally in front of your mirror by yourself with, a little sheet of paper of things you want to mention in an interview, that's a good way to practice. Daniels is always hosting mock interview days, so going to those, making sure that you're practicing your interviews, sitting down with a peer and saying, hey, if I get a question like this is kind of what I want to come across. Does it sound like that's what I'm getting across actually?
Going into interviews, it's stylistic. I would say some advice I'd have for stylistic and how you approach is never in an interview. Don't feel like you can't take a moment to collect your thoughts. I think sometimes you go in and you rehearse these different behavioral answers and things like that in preparation, which is great. You should go through that process of preparing different behavioral answers and going through kind of a checklist of common interview questions. But after that, in an interview setting, you're going to get questions that you aren't necessarily entirely prepared for, and that's okay. And I think a really good piece of advice is never be afraid to just even say, I'm going to take a moment and think about that, and kind of collect your thoughts, because you don't want to ramble, you don't want to stammer, things like that.
Another big thing that was really helpful for me was being able to answer the question, tell me about yourself. So that's one of those things that we never really think anyone's going to ask, hey, just tell me a little bit about yourself. But I've had interviews that's the first 15 minutes, and it's just a recap of who you are and what you've done and what you're working on and who you are, and do they want to talk to you more. Sometimes they'll see some behavioral questions, so being ready for those.
It's really important in an interview to know about yourself and know your story, where you came from, what you're doing now, and then also be able to talk about where you want to be and what some of your goals and passions are for the future. And if you really understand your story and you can talk about yourself in a way that without bragging but also highlighting your strengths, I think if you can do that effectively and talk about yourself effectively, that's how you can be successful through the interview process.
One trick that really I think helped me as I went through recruiting was think of something that you're really proud of, or something that you've accomplished, and be able to adapt that story to different interview questions. So look at the lists that are common of interviews and say, how could I use this experience to speak to something I've been a leader in, or something where I've influenced someone else, or just again, look to those questions and say, is this something that I could adapt to on the spot in an interview? And once you have scenarios down for that, it can be crucial as you go through it, especially when you have interviews back to back, like you oftentimes do in the recruiting process. It saves stress of worrying about each one individually.
The biggest challenge that I had was having an interview that's all you asking questions of the professional. So being ready for that and saying, if I were to walk into this interview, which I know is 45 minutes long, would I be able to run the interview? Would I be able to ask the questions? Would I be able to have enough information about the firm? Would I be able to know enough about the profession to ask 45 minutes worth of questions? I think that's one of the biggest tips that I can offer is be prepared to have an interview that they don't ask you anything about yourself, you're just asking them.
The question portion of the interview is one of the most important parts, and I think that you should go in with just general questions about the firm, about the culture, or about opportunities. Maybe you researched on their website, they had some sort of international rotation that you could do, so ask them about that. But also I think it's really important to gain a sense of understanding of what the interviewer is like and try to learn a little bit about their background, because normally the interview will kick off with them telling you a little bit about themselves, and you can follow up if you pay attention and listen during that time instead of being maybe nervous, or if you can really listen to them and try to learn about where they come from, you can ask them questions just about their career, and that's a great way to connect with the interviewer, and just develop a connection instead of having the kind of formal, very formal feel of an interview.
The biggest thing I think that you're going to get out of these interviews is talk to them about what their day-to-day is like. What do they enjoy about their job? What do they enjoy about their firm? What fulfillment do they have from the position that they're in? Is it, for some people, it may be their firm's kind of, extra programs that they may have. It may be their charities that they do. It may be their women's programs that they do, something like that. Other people, they love the almost more kind of technical side of it, and they love, getting down in the work. But ask them, I think, what that's like. And the most important thing is, a lot of people say, the generic question is, so what's the culture at your firm like? But I think it's important to ask, kind of more, what's the feel like, what's your day-to-day like, and what do you enjoy most about working for your firm in your position?
Following up is important because it shows you care. It shows you're interested. It shows you're going a little bit above and beyond. The firms keep record of any interactions that they have with you, and maybe we shouldn't say that. But I think it's just important to show that you're interested. I would say the best way to follow up is to find something about the conversation that you had with somebody and mention that in your follow-up.
It's just a little piece of your brand that you can leave with somebody. So if you're someone who goes above and beyond, and that's what you want to show your potential employer, the firm that you interviewed with, you can send them a handwritten thank you note, which I think is super important and a great way to differentiate yourself compared to the other number of people that they're interviewing.
When you interview with individuals like partners of firms or some of the higher level leadership, I think it's still important to send those handwritten thank you notes, and that just sends a message that you have taken the extra time, the extra thought to really make an asserted effort that's specific to that interviewer. With that, in those, don't make them generic. I think it's important in your thank you notes to speak to something that you talked about in the interview, and allow it to be something that they can use as a reference tool to remember you as an interview candidate. It can really be a tool as they think back at all the candidates they interview. If they get a handwritten nice thank you note, they can look at it and say, oh, I remember this conversation, I remember that person. It can really work to your advantage in the future.
Want to follow up because you just never know if that makes it could make the difference between getting an office visit or not. You really don't know, so you'd rather cover your bases than make an assumption and say, well, I really made a good impression with this particular firm. They know who I am, they know what my GPA is, they know I'm really smart, and I'm the right person. But they're looking at it also as, how are you going to conduct yourself on the job?
The biggest thing in interviews is to stay relaxed, I think. Be yourself. They know that you're nervous. They know that you're sitting across the table, and this could very well be your very first interview for a real big kid job ever. So they're prepared for that. And they really, in the accounting profession, were, I would say in a sense, lucky in that they, first and foremost, they know we're smart. And they know that if you're at this institution and you're in this program, that you've got what it takes to be in the profession. So really what they want to do is get to know you. So people are people. Sit down and have a conversation with these people. I mean, they're here taking time out of their day, so just enjoy, I think, being in the moment and don't get so caught up in the process.